One. And welcome everyone to another Smart Money Circle episode. I'm Adam Sarhan. With me today is a special guest, Lynn Teachworth, who's a mental and physical performance therapist at Tunamics.com. The links are going to be in the description. Lynn does some incredible work, energy work, and physical mental performance work. So I'm really excited about today's interview. Lynn, thank you so much for taking the time and welcome to the Smart Money Circle.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Lynn, I always like to begin. Can you please tell us your story and how you got to where you are today?
I guess it's kind of been a long story, 30 years in the making. I grew up in a tiny little farm town in Nebraska called Superior, Nebraska, and my dad was a pretty well-known chiropractor, and he was always into energy stuff and acupuncture and fascia and all these cool things. And of course, I wanted nothing to do with that really. I wanted to be, in the economics and marketing degree. So I went to the University of Nebraska at Kearney and got my degree in that. And of course, a year after that, I moved to Dallas, and luckily enough, a drunk lady rear-ended me and destroyed my neck and my car. And I was going to, just one of the regular chiropractors you hear about that just do the same thing and adjust you and do basically nothing for you to make money off your insurance. And I was like, well, all right, Dad, this is, what's this? I feel like he's not doing anything but the same thing every time. And that was kind of that's not a knock on chiropractors. I love them, but it's like any profession. You get people that want to make money or people that do great work, and sometimes it's hard to do both. But I kind of went that route for years and years and became, you know, that's my main job actually now is traveling around the world and teaching physical therapists, massage therapists, and chiropractors really, really advanced functional biomechanics and structural body work. And somewhere along the way, right as I was working, my son was really, really damaged by vaccines when he was born. Now, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but they almost killed him, right? He had a horrible reaction, and I tried for 4 years to do anything I could to help him. In fact, he could only eat 5 foods at the time, and otherwise he was just super reactive. And then I was at a conference helping somebody teach about rotator cuff injuries, and somebody there was we were kind of talking, and she said, "Oh yeah, my daughter had horrible psoriasis and allergies, and I took her to this guy that did this technique called BodyTalk, and it totally fixed her." I'm like, "Well, what is that? I need to know, right?" Because I'd tried every medical doctor and acupuncturist and nutritionist and NEAET practitioner, and nothing was really helping. And I found the one lady in Orlando that did it. And before this, by the way, to back up 1 second, I was doing, I would work with a lot of chiropractors and people that would be doing a lot of techniques like neuroemotional technique, right? Because when you start going down the rabbit hole of health, so much of what we're dealing with is really, really on an emotional level, and that's causing most chronic disease. Actually, the more I learn, the more I'm like, yeah, this is a belief system or whatever. And I used to send all my clients to a couple of chiropractic friends to help them get the emotional stuff out, and I wasn't able to take that technique at the time. So when I did find I was with a body talk practitioner at the time to take my son to, I took him in there, and she was kind of testing his arm and tapping on his head. And I'm not a fan of new age therapies or anything like. I mean, if you can't show me the science, not that I don't get into the quantum realm, as you know, right? But
Right?
I she was just tapping on my head and working on a few things, and I was kind of sitting there like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. And then she took me into another room, and she's like, "Hey, was he a wanted child or was he a mistake?" And I said, "Well, yeah, he wasn't planned, but like, how are you figuring that out?" She goes, "Well, I'm just testing his body." And that type of technique, instead of trying to figure out what's wrong with people and diagnose them, which is great. If you're in an emergency medical situation, you have to diagnose the problem. But when you're looking at healthcare and getting people better, diagnosing doesn't help. It's like, here's your label, right? So what
Hmm.
we do in that technique is we test for what the priority is, not what's wrong, but what your body wants to do. So it might take you to moving a vertebrae or releasing some emotional trauma or shifting a belief system. And so I was kind of like, well, she was figuring out some stuff with my son that there was no way anybody else could know that. And I kind of freaked me out. I'm like, oh my God, is this 1-800 psychic network? And I was like ready to
Right.
run out room. But I let her continue. And, when we were done, she was like, oh, yeah, well, I, cleared his DNA markers. And we were doing epigenetic stuff way back 25 years ago before anybody else was because of one of our friends, Dr. Laura Stuve, that helps teach that was doing most of the epigenetic research stuff and putting it together, right? And so, anyway, I said thanks, and she wanted me to see him in 10 days. And I was like, yeah, you'll never see me again. This is too weird. Bye. And I put my little hyperactive ADD kid in the car, and he fell asleep and slept for about 18 hours and got up and never had another allergy. And his
Wow.
eczema that was over 40% of his body was gone in a week. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
He's two, when you're 5 years old, you don't have a whole lot of placebo effects, right? So I was like, I need to go figure that out. And so I ended up teaching it and writing a lot of fascial release, energetic fascial release courses, and I taught it in 9 different countries around the world. And, before that technique kind of blew up, there's other stuff I recommend now, but that's how I kind of got into this whole thing around belief systems and attitudes, right? Because I went through a ton of training with that, and I started, it doesn't make your life perfect, of course, right? But your life always is going to have some crap happen to you, but it's how you react to it, but also what you attract. And I was, in some bad relationships and not that successful. And I cleared a lot of that stuff out of me and went on to become one of the top people in the world at what I do. And I get to work with some amazing NFL players and politicians and big CEOs of all top athletes. And it's because they want results. And so going down that rabbit hole and having that happen to my son, I always kind of tease him like, thanks, Thomas. Sorry about you're fine now, but you allowed me to go learn some cool things, which leads me to working with people like you. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Wow, I love that. It's almost as if your son's situation unblocked something in you also and gave you that freedom to explode and find your path.
Yeah, it just kind of, I think God always has a way of humbling us. And, when especially, coming from a pretty strict religious background, I'm still a very spiritual person, but we tend to look at things that we don't understand and be afraid of them and then realize that's really the truth about how things work. And yeah, it was very humbling. Still is every day I go to work for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about your company. What do you do and how do you help people in the simplest
Well,
terms?
I have a clinic here in Orlando, right, that I work with people. My specialty is really chronic pain, and functional biomechanics, but also mental performance and sports performance. I'm a gift fellow through what's called the Gray Institute, which is the highest end functional biomechanics training you can get. I also do a lot of structure. I do 34 different types of massage, but then I also am certified in 7 types of advanced energy medicine stuff, all really legit stuff. So I kind of say, hey, uh, God made us in his image, right? You could say that it's like Father, Son, Holy Spirit. We have the physical body, we have how it moves, how the physiology works, and all the information. But the Vedic philosophies, it's the same thing. It's Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Everything's a triad. And so what my wife Ann and I like to do is we co-teach together. We kind of like to say, well, if you're only addressing the body from one level or just the physical level or just the physical therapy or working out and strengthening things to get you out of pain, which doesn't really work and never really has, right? And then all of a sudden there's the energetic level, whether it's acupuncture or belief systems or all of the great techniques out there, source point therapy, whatever, right? You have to be able to come at the body from all the different levels, or you don't have a lot of success in getting long-term disease or sports performance better or mental health better. And so I'm actually the only person in the world that's certified in all 3 levels of that. So I do, some of my people will come in just to do energy work or a lot of salespeople to get their belief systems sorted out. Or if they're going through a rough patch where they're not selling, we might dive into belief systems and clear some of that stagnancy out. Or it could just be lower back pain, right? Easiest thing in the world to fix if you know how to do it. Or it could be you know, traumatic brain injuries, whatever. We always say if it's not broken or torn, we can show you how to fix it. And so I have my clinic, but then we travel all over the world and teach constantly to advanced therapies for therapists. So that's kind of
Right.
my business. And then on the side, I also have a venture capital firm with my good friend Richard Poger from South Africa. And we might buy and flip houses. We might We've got a few Turo cars. We invest in things. Of course, Chris Sullivan, you've had on your show, is a very good friend of mine, and we invest with Hyperion Decimus too in the crypto market. So I kind of like, my job is $1 per hour job sometimes in my clinic, and I charge quite a bit of money, but it's also if I'm not working, I'm getting paid. In my old economics business background, I like to get into that too. So it's kind of, I like to do a lot of things and learn constantly. So that's kind of what my business is. I try to help people be successful no matter what it is, but I also have to show up and do it myself.
No, I love that. And I know you also offer online classes and you do online sessions in case somebody's not physically in Orlando, but they can visit you online as
Yeah.
well. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I do a lot of the, because the energy stuff, the quantum stuff, right? I mean, I probably 30% of my clientele is all over the world. Or if I have an athlete that's out somewhere. In fact, I was just working with the tennis player this morning that tweaked his elbow and he's not even in this country, but we are out tweaking with him. And the science behind that is so proven. It's like, there's more science to prove that I can do that than there is for like Prozac. So it's kind of funny. But I work with people all over the place, CEOs and business people or just people that want to keep their performance up. And instead of giving them a rah-rah speech like a life coach or a mental coach, which is important, right? Performance coaching. But instead of doing that, it's like, well, let me just go in and clear out all your belief systems and the old trauma that are keeping you from being who you need to be. Lasts way longer and works way better.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a few minutes, if you don't mind, the belief
Yeah.
system, clearing it out. So somebody believes I'm not good enough to do XYZ, beat the market, and if they're trading stocks or sell $1 billion or whatever that mental block is or mental wall is that they have in their head. So can you talk about that? Do you identify what that block is first, and how do you clear it?
Yeah, yeah. So that's one of the things, right? So when I'm looking at working with people, once again, I'm kind of testing their body. I just assume that I'm really stupid and I don't know much, and I would rather work with their body because it's going to tell me what it wants, right? Once again, we're coming back to I have protocols that I use, right? Because I might use BodyTalk or Body Intuitive or Source Point Therapy or UN method because every one of those techniques works great, but they come at it different ways. So I like to have an arsenal of tools because a lot of people would just do like EMDR or EFTF tapping, and that's all great, but it's very outdated, right? There's things that go way, way quicker that we can shift through. And so when we look at why people get nervous or they don't perform, we have to look at it from a couple different ways. Now, of course, if we looked at it from a belief system way, right? People are always talking about, oh, I want to go get my emotions cleared or my emotions balanced, or, oh, I'm going to do an emotional release technique. That's all fine and dandy, but if you just clear the emotions, they will come back very soon because emotions come from belief systems, right? And so when something happens, our minds are amazing things. You always say a mind is a terrible thing, right? Because it's great for us. It's the difference between us and an antelope, or a springbok in South Africa. It gets attacked by a lion and it freaks out and it runs away. And 10 minutes later, it's aware, but it's just sitting there relaxing and drinking some water again and relaxed. And here we are, 30 years later, like, oh my God, this lion almost got me because when things happen, our minds make up meanings. Like this happened and I made it mean this, right? So, and that's the survivalist mechanism, right? So, hey, if two girls in a row and I'm seventh grade tell me they don't want to date me, then it's like, well, I'm going to make that mean I'm not good enough or I quit or I'm not good at this or whatever, right? I'm not good looking enough. And we have to look at that pattern. If two dogs attack us, the only two dogs we've ever seen, well, dogs are bad. So we have to go
Right.
out and clear out the trauma and then go in and shift the other stuff. And so the emotions are really coming off what we believe. And the way God designed it is so as you believe, so as it is, right? What you sow, you will reap. So that's why you can see people walk into a room and like, oh, that's always the nicest guy everybody loves. And the next guy goes in and he's in a fight with somebody, right? Because you have your belief systems and you have somebody else's belief systems and they clash, right? So what we do is belief systems are very healthy and they're good, but it's when we get beliefs that are destructive that gets us because I don't really like when you used to think about, oh, what was that new agey thing a year ago, like years ago, the law of attraction, where it was like, oh, if you just,
Yeah, the
write and
secret.
do your vision board, you'll attract this. And yeah, good luck. It doesn't, I mean, it helps, but that type of thing doesn't work. But if we can go in and shift somebody's belief system about themselves or the world or the markets or how much they need to do, right? Because it's very important about that. It doesn't matter what you do, you're going to have to work hard. But then I like to go in and destroy that belief system because people have money from their parents or they win a lottery, right? But what are the odds of that? So we want to make sure we clear out anything that's regular. Like I'll work with a lot of, professional golfers, and they might come in, when they're trying to get on the tour, and okay, this is great. I love working with those guys because they're humble and they're trying everything, but it doesn't mean they will have a career like Tiger Woods did because you still have to have the beliefs. That's the problem is everybody's like, oh, well, you can be anything you want when you grow up. Well, gee, if I wanted to be Patrick Mahomes, yeah, sorry, I'm a 5'10" slow
Right.
white guy with bad genetics. Yeah, I can't be that, right? So we have to be realistic, but at least if we can get people to stop self-sabotaging, then they can really, really up their things. And that's usually just in physical stuff, right? But the mental things and all that with what we can do with brains and brain networks and what we understand and really optimize those and clear them, we can really help people be great. Now, the other thing is too, I want to say with that, most of those high level golfers or athletes that I've worked with or even in business, they're pretty dysfunctional because there's no way you get to become the best in the world at what you do without being dysfunctional and obsessive, right? So some of those people that I work with, right, I've actually had said, we can't go after this belief system right now because you know how our press is and how social media is like, well, this is really stressing you out, but if we get rid of it, you're going to stop trying so hard and everybody's going to be like, oh, you're not good anymore. So sometimes we leave those for public
Right.
consumption, right? But overall health, we could get to the point to where we're all happy and we don't care if we're rich and poor and we're great where we are. We can operate out of prosperity as opposed to necessity, and possibility. It really changes our world because in the end of the day, like, hey, I trade stocks, I'm doing everything. I'm like debating whether or not to put more money in Bitcoin now. It went over 100,000 today and blah, 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 blah. But it's like, I try to get to the point, well, it doesn't matter. And if I lost it, it'd be okay. I might cry and be whiny for a while.
Right.
We just have look, it's like, what are we actually trying to do by doing that? Well, this will give me more power and freedom to have a life. And it's like, well, stop buying stuff and maybe you would have that, right? So it's all of our belief systems about what we think will make us safe and okay.
Understood. So let's talk about a few th thank you, number one. There's a lot of really good stuff there that I want to just unpack a little bit. So you have a belief system that's secret, or the movie, The Law of Attraction, the book is what you're
Mhm.
referring to. And people say, okay, I'm going to think about, a blue horseshoe, a blue horseshoe, blue horseshoe, or whatever the case is, a pink elephant. And then all of a sudden a pink elephant shows up. But that's not the case. There's a disconnect there. So there's feelings, there's emotions, and then there's the beliefs, and there's more to it. The energy, you mentioned quantum before. Can you
Yeah.
speak a little bit and let people know what exactly, I mean, what are some things you see in common? High performance people, you said they're dysfunctional. I get that. I get that a lot. I'm
Yeah.
obsessive. I
Yeah,
get
totally.
called names all the time. Get that. Personally, I get that. I understand. But what are some commonalities you see, either mistakes or things that high performance people do in any world, any endeavor that you
Well, I think it's really interesting and going down that rabbit hole. And, I've been so blessed to work with, people that you hear about in the news every day and see what they do. And, every single one of us is dysfunctional and, we try to work with that and go through, but part of that's what makes us great. I mean, how many great musicians would we have had if they would have been all sober and happy and never had a bad relationship, right? So I think God uses our dysfunction. Everything is a gift and a curse, right? And that's just kind of how it works. So, um, I think though working with the high end people, there's people that set goals, but what happens with, I think, setting goals, you need to know where you're going, right? But way more important than goals. And I think, we've been talking about this in the I hate to say energy realm because I don't like energy medicine, but informational medicine and quantum field. For years, we've been talking about standards as opposed to goals, right? Because you get your standards. Hey, if I have a standard that I work out every day and eat good, I'm gonna get in shape. And so goals can be sometimes lofty, but we have to reverse engineer those and then build the standards. So a lot of the people that I've seen that have been great have been very, very high standards and just ways of looking at the world. And one of the best things that ever happened to me is I a couple of years ago, I have a guy who really good friend of mine. I really like it, but he can be a little bit negative when we work some stuff. And he owns a big software company, and he came in, and I'm like, "Hey, how's work?" He goes, "Man, I'm hiring these new people, and you think people know what they're doing, but you just have to train them." He wasn't like saying people are stupid, but they just don't get it. I don't have enough time to retrain employees all the time. It's so hard to find good employees, and he left. And then the guy that came in afterwards is good friends of some of my friends here, but he's one of the more famous English business people that will know that has, a lot to do with music and airlines and other places, right? And I'm
A
working
company
with him.
called
I said,
Virgin,
man, I
maybe.
just, what's
A
that?
company called Virgin, maybe.
Yeah, I
Maybe.
can't disclose,
I
but
won't say
something
it.
like that.
Right.
But super nice guy. And here I'm talking to this guy, and he's amazing, but he also is very dyslexic. And I'm like, wow, having a conversation with this guy isn't what I thought. But he was so nice. And, I really appreciate working with you. We didn't do a whole lot of mental stuff. He was in there for other stuff. But um, I was just like, wow, I really appreciate how great you are at business and what you do. Because, I just have a vision. There's all these people that work for me that are so smart, and I just find people that are smarter than me and let them go and give them direction. And it's so great. I'm looking at these two guys going, wow, they have completely different belief systems and experiences around their clients. And I was like, wow, that's fascinating. Which one of those do I want to be? Right. And it just goes to show you there's more than one way to be successful, but are you enjoying it and having your vision, or are you kind of negative and worried and stressed out about it? It's just really fascinating to see stuff like that.
Yeah, this is really, really powerful. So you see, high performance people, they tend to be not normal by definition because they're focused
Yeah.
on and obsessive. I get that. Let's talk about some mistakes that you see people make that want to become more successful, but they're not able to get there. You spoke about standards and beliefs, which I think is brilliant, and that's a very important thing too. What else are there commonalities that you see or
Yeah,
pitfalls
I
that people?
think it's the people that are very humble and very meek and realize that they don't know everything, because when you do know everything, you stop learning and you stop listening, right? And so and they are also not afraid to get help, and they're not afraid to be vulnerable and say, yeah, hey, I've got some stuff I need to clear out. I've got
Yeah,
some things where I'm struggling and I'm not strong to this. I'm being very reactive about something. And they know that. So instead of doubling down, they're more like, hey, I need help. This is great. Because, we can't take over the world by ourselves, right? We need to build a team, and having build a good team and having a good leader that isn't a tyrant in there making things happen. They're supporting everybody around them to do their job the best, I think is where you see the most successful stuff
got it.
for sure.
So, next question for you, Lynn. You mentioned back pain is easy to clear. How do you do that?
Uh-huh. What's that?
How? How do you? I know a lot of people
Well,
suffer from back pain. How do you clear it?
Well,
Is it something?
everybody laughs because I could literally make a functional stretching video in 5 minutes that would take care of most of people's lower back pain. What happens is bones are stupid, first of all, right? So when we think about just biomechanics, your lumbar spine, right? It's pretty simple. You've got five vertebrae that sit on a sacrum, and then you have these two big bones called ilium. And we tend to look at those, and we do x-rays and go, oh, there's a herniated disc, let's go in there. Or even in the neck, oh, you've got no curve in your neck, which has nothing to do with your neck. It has to do with your lower legs most of the time, right? So when the body compensates, we have to look at that. But what happens with people is, there's all these glory muscles that people talk about. You hear like, oh, it's my psoas, and oh, it's my piriformis muscle, which are great muscles, but the psoas doesn't have that much to do with lower back pain. It's very important, but it's what we call your quadriceps and your adductors. So the way that your body works, in fact, if this video, I can show you this in 2 seconds if I stand up, right? So if somebody's standing up, well, this won't work. But if I stand up we have to look at compensations in the body, right? So if we talk about what your lumbar spine does, if we make it super simple, if we bend forward, it goes into flexion, and we lean back, it goes into what we call extension, right? And so what happens when people's muscles in between their legs called the adductors, which actually don't pull your legs together unless you're in a bad 90s boy band or on a machine at the gym, right? That's not what those muscles do. They more decelerate rotation. But if we tighten those up in our quads, what that does is it tips our pelvis forward. And then if
Okay.
we're going to be walking around staring at the ground, that might work, but we have to stand up straight. So if those don't shorten up and we stand up, then all of a sudden your lumbar spine is going backwards into extension and jamming all what we call the facet joints and the discs together. Or if you get it more on one side, say that is a little bit tighter on the right side, that's going to jam up what's called your sacroiliac joint on the right side. It's jamming the bones together. And I don't care how many times you adjust that, your lower back, or you do go get a spinal decompression and decompress all that stuff. That's all fine and dandy and it has its place. But if I have to see people for lower back pain more than twice, then there's really something wrong because I give them the homework to do to stretch their quads and get everything else. But if you get all that opened up, it takes the compression out of the spine and then the discs aren't aggravated and all that. Because unless they're too far gone, herniated discs are pretty easy to get back. You just need somebody that knows under biomechanics or Rolfing or instructional integration and put them together. But there's only like four of us in the world, so I put that together and teach therapists how to do that all the time. But when you're looking at really working with the body, you're going to spend about 80% of the body in the front, right? Because you could have connective tissue around your bladder that's restricted or anything like that, and that will hammer your low back. So everyone's always stretching their hamstrings to make their lower back better, and 90% of the time it's going to make you worse because of what. Now, that was a generality that I was talking about. Of course, it can be a lot more things, but that's how you fix lower back pain, do a real functional stretch for your quads. And anybody wants to email me at lynn@trunamics.com, I can send you a stretching video that will show you how to do your whole body and get that sorted out. It's pretty easy stuff.
I love it, Lynn. Thank you so much. It's been really fantastic. Before we go, any question I didn't ask that you think I should ask to share with the
Um,
audience?
Yeah, I
Action.
think maybe if people, especially if we're looking at, wealth in our finance and understanding what people can do to work with that. I really think just, in this day and age, investing in finances, the rules of the game are kind of changing, right? And we know what to do, but I think going back to the sound principles and a lot of what I see with people that I work with when we're working about concepts of money, a lot of times people will come in and they'll be like, "Oh man, work with me. I need to make more money. I need to make more money." I said, "No, you're fine with that, but what you're really weak to, as we call reactive to, is not having enough money." And so a lot of times I will go in and shift them about not having enough money and then what, but they're like, "No, I don't want to work with that." But I said, "But it's polarity." So you're always going to get what you're afraid of, right? That's kind of the way things designed. So we'll go in and make them okay with not having enough money, and they all of a sudden they go, "Oh, wow. So if I'm only making $50,000 a year for the rest of my life, who am I going to be about that? Well, I better cancel my Netflix and stop getting expensive cars and just work with what I have and start saving that." Then they end up having more money because it energetically, right? Money and wealth likes to build slowly and balance and grow. And just, hey, if you can save 20% and do it, it's the greed that gets us. We always want that quick fix and we always want that. And I always joke about when I get that time machine fixed, I'm going to go back and buy Microsoft in college and then turn it all into Dell Computer and then turn it all into Bitcoin and, on and on and on.
Right, right.
But, there's always going to be opportunities, right? There's always going to be opportunities to make money. But if we just realize, well, what is it that I really want the money for? And a lot of times that comes down, yeah, we want to help people and be altruistic, but it's really just about freedom and power. And so if we can really look at that's what it's about, then we can kind of shift some of that greed out of the way and look at it as the long haul as opposed to trying to hit, just hit a base hit every day as opposed to hit a home run. It works a lot better because we know from people in the NBA and NFL and the lottery winners, when you get it all at once, it tends not to last because you haven't built up the energy or the know how to appreciate it and make it build, right? So when we get all at once, which we've all done, that lucky trade, right? We do. If we, it's hard to say, yeah, let's throw that all back in. It's like, and we're going to Hawaii, right? So I think that's one of the things to look at that. And if people have issues with that, if they could find a body intuitive practitioner or a Ewan method or somebody to go in and help clear that out, because our hangups that we usually have aren't now what we think they are, and our mind will always tell us what it takes to get out of it, and it's usually never true, right? If I just did this, I'd be okay. It's like, well, be okay now and then think about it. So that's the one thing I run into a lot about finance and success.
I love that. So I have my right shoulder hurts. So
Yeah.
lots of times my left trying to compensate, but I'm just trying to fix this. Meanwhile, the issue is really stemming from this. That's a polarity that you're talking about with the lack
Well,
of.
it can be with that, but like each body part has a psychology that does it. And I have a class I teach on that, looking at it from Vedic, Western medicine and Chinese medicine, because all your bodies all have reciprocal joints that balance it out in the fascial system, the functional biomechanics, not only the acupuncture meridians, but body-centered psychology. So we have to look at that, but sometimes it's just like, hey, you're spending too much time on your computer, or you threw too many footballs when you were young, or it's a belief system. And a lot of times, if it's chronic, it's all of that. But yeah, most shoulder problems come from hip problems, and we look at biomechanics, so we have to look at all that. It's complex and easy.
Sorry, I meant the fact that on the right side you could have pain, but really the left side is where it stems from. So what you're,
It can
sorry,
be, yes, for
yeah.
sure.
So the money not making, I want to make more money. It's not so much the block isn't I can't make more money. It's more, hey, let's talk about the lack, the other side of
Yeah.
that.
Or a lot of times it's like, well, why do you have to make more money? What did you
Right.
do? Right? That's
Exactly.
that's just it.
Exactly.
So we go
Yeah.
clear that out. So yeah, it is. And if we just look at settling down in the baselines, but then look at our belief systems that, I like to clear everything because of that polarity. And a lot of times people will get what a negative. It's like, oh, I have to make more money, but I can't.
Yeah.
So
All
it's
right.
I have to, but I can't. And then you're the snake and the mouse in front of the snake that's paralyzed. So we have to go clear both sides of the belief system, and then it works. So yeah, it's can be pretty insidious on us when we get frozen and have no outcome. That's where it gets bad.
Yeah, no, Lynn, this makes perfect sense. Okay, final question for you. What's the best piece of advice you'd like to give the audience or your 30-year-old self?
Oh, my 30-year-old self. I would say go back and look at saving. I guess I don't know. I've been wiped out a couple times in my life. If I could go back to my 30-year-old self, I'd be like, tithe on everything you get, save 20% and invest it, and do not bend or break that, even if you can't eat, because it's pretty easy to be wealthy if you follow the right things and just get educated, right? Go read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, all that good stuff. That's what I'm looking at right now, is how can I get my tax burden lower? Just keep getting educated, because things change and you can never learn enough. And all the stuff that we need to learn is not in college, right? It's like all my degrees are great, but I had to learn it all in person, just like we all do. So I think just keep getting educated and keep moving forward and have discipline. That's it.
Absolutely love it. So, Lynn, as you're speaking, there's so much, I mean, a lot of parallels to my own journey as well. So I know I don't know. I've got one job, and that's to learn. That's my greatest strength, is what I tell people. I've been telling people
Yeah,
that for 30 years. And then I started a foundation called Happy Face Project, which literally teaches people essential life skills they don't learn in the classroom. And it's a nonprofit and a foundation, all that fun stuff. So everything you're saying is dear
awesome.
to my heart. Yeah, and I know you didn't know any of that stuff. So
No,
I
that's
love
great. I love to hear it. Yeah, no, we hit it off immediately. We're very
it.
similar in that. I love it. That's
Love it.
great.
Beautiful. Well, then, thank you so much. What is you said you gave us your email. What is the best way for people to get a hold of you or learn more about what you take some of your courses you have online?
Yeah, I
Your,
mean, they can go to truenamics.com. Most of my education is very, very high end for really advanced therapists and doctors and things. But a lot of the body-centered psychology, they can go to truenamics.com and see our stretching video is there, like I was talking about, or they can go to, there's a class I wrote called Integrative Anatomy, which is one of the best self-care techniques you can do to keep your body balanced and reverse a lot of damage in it, but also balance your body on all three levels. So that's really fun. And then if people are interested in working with me, I'm usually booked way, way out. But if you're interested in something I want to take on, you can just send me an email at lynn@truenamics.com and whatever. But if I'm here to help anybody that needs anything, if I
Or
can do
money.
it.
Yeah, thank you kindly, Lynn. That was fantastic.
All
And
right, thank
everybody
you. So.
recommend, yeah, everybody out there strongly recommend reaching out. Lynn's fantastic. I could tell you from personal experience, and hopefully Lynn will have you on again soon. This was fantastic. I do want to talk to you more about some of the other subjects which we didn't dive into today, energy work, the quantum work, and pick your brain and all that fun stuff. But
Oh yeah, love to. Love to.
with
That'd
that,
be great. I consider it an honor.
all right, thanks, Lynn.
Thanks,
Speak to you
Adam.
soon.
Have a great day.